The sun was setting over Chicago's bustling suburbs when Robert Chen signed the final papers to purchase Premium Motors. His hands trembled slightly as he set down the pen, not from nervousness, but from pure excitement. At 45, this wasn't his first business venture, but there was something special about owning a luxury car dealership. Maybe it was because of his humble beginnings, fixing up old cars in his parents' garage. "Congratulations, Mr. Chen," the lawyer said, gathering the documents. "Premium Motors is officially yours." Robert nodded, glancing at his reflection in the office window. His usual crisp suit was replaced by a casual sweater and jeans. He had plans for tomorrow, plans that made him smile. That evening, sitting in his home office overlooking the city lights, Robert thought about his journey. 20 years ago, he was working 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Now he owned multiple successful businesses across the Midwest. But success hadn't changed his core belief. To truly understand a business, you had to experience it from the ground up. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through Premium Motors' online reviews. They were mixed, some glowing, others concerning. "Excellent selection of vehicles," read one. "But the customer service needs work," said another. Robert made mental notes, his entrepreneurial mind already forming strategies. His younger brother Tommy called while he was reading the reviews. "Hey, big shot. Heard you closed the deal today." Robert could hear the pride in his brother's voice. "You're still going through with your mystery shopper plan tomorrow?" "You know me too well," Robert laughed. "I need to see how they treat regular customers." "Oh," Tommy suddenly exclaimed. "I've got the perfect thing for your undercover mission. Remember that gag gift I got you last Christmas? The red hat? Wear that. Nobody would expect a dealership owner in one of those." Robert walked to his closet and found the hat, still in its box. He hadn't worn it before, but for tomorrow's purpose, it was perfect. Simple, distinctive, and definitely not what anyone would expect from someone looking to buy a luxury car. He spent the rest of the evening planning his approach. His old Honda Civic, which he kept as a reminder of his early days, would be ideal for this visit. It wasn't flashy, and definitely wouldn't hint at his actual net worth. He laid out his casual clothes, jeans, a plain blue sweater, and some comfortable sneakers. Before going to bed, Robert reviewed the dealership's financial reports one more time. Premium Motors was doing okay, but he saw untapped potential. The location was prime, the inventory impressive, but something was holding them back. Tomorrow, he hoped to find out what. That night, Robert dreamed about his father's old garage. The smell of motor oil, the sound of tools clanking, and his dad's voice saying, "Son, every customer deserves respect, whether they're buying a Rolls-Royce or getting their old pickup fixed." Those words had guided him throughout his business career. Morning came quickly. Robert got ready, keeping his appearance deliberately casual. He made his usual breakfast, 2 eggs and toast, trying to calm the excitement bubbling inside him. This wasn't just about buying a business. It was about understanding it, improving it, making it better for everyone involved. As he drove toward the dealership in his Honda Civic, he rehearsed his role. He wouldn't be Robert Chen, the successful entrepreneur, but just another potential customer walking in off the street. His heart beat faster as he approached, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. The dealership's glass windows gleamed in the morning sun, luxury cars sparkling behind them. Robert adjusted the red hat in his rearview mirror and took a deep breath. 20 years of business experience had taught him that first impressions matter, both ways. Today, he would see Premium Motors' true face, not the polished version presented in business meetings. He parked his Civic between a shiny new Mercedes and a BMW, the contrast making him smile. As he stepped out of his car, the morning sun warm on his face, Robert had no idea that he was about to walk into one of the most interesting situations of his business career. Little did the people inside know that their ordinary Saturday was about to become quite extraordinary. The morning bustle at Premium Motors was in full swing when Robert pulled into the parking lot. The dealership's massive windows reflected the sunshine, making the new cars inside sparkle like jewels. He could see salespeople moving around, their faces eager as they spotted potential customers walking through the front doors. Robert checked his reflection one last time. The red hat sat casually on his head, and his simple sweater looked a bit worn, perfect for his undercover visit. He grabbed his old leather wallet, the one he'd had since college, leaving his usual designer one in the glove compartment. As he walked toward the entrance, a young couple emerged from the dealership, their faces glowing with excitement, new car keys dangling in their hands. Robert smiled, remembering his first car purchase. That feeling of achievement, of taking home something you'd worked hard for, it was priceless. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and cool air-conditioned breeze welcomed him. The showroom was impressive. Spotless floors, strategically placed luxury vehicles, and the subtle scent of new leather in the air. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting tiny rainbows across the polished cars below. Behind the front desk, a receptionist was busy on the phone. She glanced up at Robert, her welcoming smile faltering slightly as her eyes landed on his hat. She quickly looked down at her computer screen, pretending to be deeply absorbed in whatever was on it. Robert wandered over to a sleek black sports car, running his hand along its smooth surface. The price tag made him whistle, not because he couldn't afford it, but because it was exactly the kind of purchase that would make his mother scold him about responsible spending, even at his age. A few other customers were scattered around the showroom. A businessman in an expensive suit was getting detailed information about a luxury SUV, while an elderly couple examined a sophisticated sit-in. Robert noticed how quickly salespeople attended to them, while he stood there, seemingly invisible. After 5 minutes of walking around, nobody had approached him. He could feel eyes on him, though, quick, judgmental glances from the staff, followed by whispered conversations. One salesperson actually changed direction mid-walk when he saw Robert heading his way. The whole scene reminded him of a story his father used to tell. Back in the 80s, his dad had walked into a high-end electronics store wearing his mechanic's uniform, still greasy from work. Nobody would help him, assuming he couldn't afford anything. He ended up buying the biggest TV they had, paying in cash, and having the manager personally carry it to his truck. Finally, a young salesperson approached Robert. The kid looked fresh out of college, probably new to the job. "Can I, help you?" he asked, maintaining a careful distance, as if Robert's casual appearance might be contagious. "Sure," Robert replied cheerfully, pointing to the most expensive car in the showroom. "I'd like to know more about that one." The salesperson's eyes widened slightly. The limited edition model." "Sir, that vehicle is—" He hesitated, clearly trying to find a polite way to suggest Robert couldn't afford it. "Yes, that one," Robert confirmed, enjoying the awkwardness of the moment. "I'd like to know all about the financing options." "Let me, check with my manager," the salesperson stammered, backing away quickly. Robert watched as he hurried to a glass office where a woman sat behind a desk, her expression growing sterner as she listened to whatever the salesperson was saying. Through the glass, Robert could see them discussing him, with occasional glances in his direction. The woman's face showed clear disapproval as she looked at his hat, his casual clothes, his apparently middle-class appearance. Little did they know that the papers in his back pocket could buy and sell this dealership several times over. Robert pretended to be very interested in the car's window sticker, all while watching the drama unfold in the manager's office. He'd seen this kind of behavior before. Judgment based on appearances, assumptions made without a single meaningful interaction. It was exactly why he'd chosen to come incognito. The young salesperson was coming back, looking uncomfortable. Behind him, the manager was rising from her desk, her face set in a determined expression. Robert smiled to himself. Things were about to get interesting. From her glass office, the dealership manager watched Robert like a hawk sizing up its prey. Her perfectly pressed suit and stern expression gave her an intimidating presence, even from a distance. She kept glancing at his red hat with visible distaste, her lips pressed into a thin line. The young salesperson returned to Robert's side, shifting his weight nervously from foot to foot. "Sir, my manager would like to know if you're pre-approved for financing," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. His name tag was crooked, and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead. "Actually," Robert replied, pulling out his phone, "I was thinking of paying cash. Let me just check my account balance." He made a show opening his banking app, enjoying how the salesperson's eyes widened at the mere mention of a cash purchase. A well-dressed couple walked in at that moment, and Robert noticed how another salesperson practically sprinted to greet them. The contrast in treatment was impossible to miss. The couple, dressed in designer clothes, received immediate attention while he stood there, still waiting for basic information about the car he'd asked about. The young salesperson kept glancing back at his manager's office, like a student seeking approval from a strict teacher. "Sir, perhaps I could show you some of our more affordable options," he suggested, gesturing toward the pre-owned section visible through a side window. Robert pretended not to notice the subtle insult. Instead, he pointed to the leather seats of the luxury car beside them. "These seats are beautiful. Is this real Italian leather?" he asked, genuinely curious about the craftsmanship. Before the salesperson could answer, the manager's heels clicked across the showroom floor. She emerged from her office, clipboard in hand, her face wearing what Robert recognized as a practiced problem customer expression. He'd seen that look before, back when he was starting out and trying to secure his first business loan. The other customers in the showroom began to take notice of the situation. An elderly man paused his conversation with another salesperson to watch. A woman who had been examining a red convertible pretended to be very interested in her phone, but her eyes kept darting over to observe the scene. The manager's approach was interrupted by a phone call. She stopped halfway to Robert, answering her cell phone with obvious irritation. Robert could hear snippets of her conversation, something about a VIP customer coming later that day. The irony made him smile. While the manager was distracted, Robert wandered over to another vehicle, this one even more expensive than the first. He opened the driver's door and sat down, settling into the plush seat. The young salesperson hovered nearby, looking increasingly uncomfortable with each passing moment. The new car smell filled Robert's nostrils, bringing back memories of his first dealership visit years ago. Back then, he really couldn't afford anything on the lot. A salesperson had treated him poorly, and he promised himself that if he ever succeeded, he'd make sure no customer felt that way in his business. Through the car's windshield, he could see the manager finishing her phone call. Her face had grown redder, and she was gripping her clipboard so tightly her knuckles were white. The young salesperson kept looking between Robert and his manager, like a spectator at a tennis match. Other staff members had stopped what they were doing to watch the situation unfold. They tried to appear busy, shuffling papers or typing on computers, but their attention was clearly focused on what was about to happen. Robert adjusted his hat in the rearview mirror, making sure it was clearly visible. He could feel the tension building in the showroom. It was like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air gets heavy and everyone knows something big is about to happen. The manager was walking toward him again, her stride purposeful. The clicking of her heels echoed through the now quiet showroom. Robert remained seated in the luxury car, calmly examining the dashboard features as if he didn't have a care in the world. The young salesperson took a few steps back, clearly wanting to distance himself from whatever was about to happen. The manager was just a few steps away now, her face set in an expression that suggested this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Robert took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was coming next. The tension in the showroom reached its peak as Robert began asking detailed questions about the luxury vehicle's financing options. The young salesperson, still sweating, fumbled through basic answers while constantly glancing at the manager's office for help. "What kind of interest rates are you offering this month?" Robert asked, pulling out a small notebook from his back pocket. He started jotting down notes, something he'd done since his early business days. The salesperson blinked rapidly, clearly surprised by the professional question coming from someone he judged as a non-serious buyer. "Well, sir," the salesperson stammered, "our rates typically start at, He shuffled through some papers, dropping several on the spotless showroom floor. A few other customers watched the scene with mild amusement, whispering among themselves. The manager, who had been watching like a hawk from her office, finally picked up her phone. Through the glass walls, Robert could see her talking urgently to someone, repeatedly pointing in his direction. Her free hand kept gesturing at her computer screen, probably checking for any previous customer history. Robert moved on to his next question, maintaining his role perfectly. "I'm interested in the extended warranty options, too. Could you break down the coverage tiers for me?" He pulled out reading glasses from his pocket, adding to his image of a serious buyer despite his casual appearance. The question seemed to panic the young salesperson even more. I need to consult with my manager about the current warranty packages," he said, taking another step back. "Would you excuse me for just a moment?" As the salesperson practically ran toward the manager's office, Robert noticed how other staff members were now openly staring. A group of 3 salespeople huddled near the coffee machine, whispering and pointing discreetly in his direction. The receptionist had given up any pretense of working and was watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. The manager's office had become a hive of activity. The young salesperson entered, and immediately 2 other staff members joined them. Through the glass, Robert could see them having an animated discussion. The manager kept shaking her head, pointing at something on her computer screen, then gesturing toward Robert. A wealthy-looking couple walked into the dealership, dressed impeccably in designer clothes. Robert watched as not a single salesperson moved to help them. Everyone was too focused on the drama unfolding around the man in the red hat who dared to ask about their most expensive cars. Robert took this moment to walk around the vehicle, inspecting it carefully just as his father had taught him years ago. He checked the tire treads, examined the paint job, and peered at the engine through the hood vents. His genuine interest in cars wasn't an act. It was something he developed working alongside his father in their family garage. The whispered conversations in the manager's office grew more intense. Robert could see the manager making phone calls, probably trying to figure out how to handle this situation. The young salesperson looked more uncomfortable with each passing minute, loosening his tie as if it were choking him. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes, the office door opened. The manager emerged, clutching a tablet and wearing what Robert recognized as a forced professional smile. The young salesperson trailed behind her like a shadow, looking as if he wished the ground would swallow him whole. Robert pretended not to notice their approach, instead focusing on the car's window sticker, mentally comparing the prices with what he knew were the dealer's actual costs. His years of business experience had taught him every detail of profit margins and pricing strategies. The click of the manager's heels got louder as she approached, each step echoing in the unusually quiet showroom. Every eye in the place was focused on this moment. Other customers had even paused their own negotiations to watch what was about to happen. The air conditioning hummed softly in the background, and somewhere a phone rang unanswered. The manager was just a few feet away now, her forced smile looking more strained with each step. Robert continued to study the window sticker, although he could see her reflection in the car's tinted windows. The moment of truth was approaching, and he was curious to see exactly how this would play out. The manager finally reached Robert, her high heels coming to a stop on the polished showroom floor. She cleared her throat loudly, clearly expecting him to turn around immediately. When he didn't, choosing instead to continue reading the window sticker, she cleared her throat again, this time more forcefully. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice carrying across the now silent showroom. "I need to speak with you." The words came out clipped and precise, like she'd rehearsed them in her office. Robert turned slowly, maintaining his calm demeanor. "Of course," he smiled warmly. "I was just asking your colleague here about financing options for this beautiful vehicle." He gestured toward the young salesperson, who looked like he wanted to disappear. The manager's painted-on smile tightened. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice you've been here for quite some time," she began, clutching her tablet like a shield. "We're very busy today, and our sales team needs to focus on—" She paused, searching for the right words, "qualified buyers." A few gasps could be heard from other customers nearby. An elderly couple who had been looking at a sit-in shook their heads disapprovingly at the manager's tone. The wealthy-looking couple who had walked in earlier were watching the scene unfold with obvious discomfort. "Qualified buyers," Robert repeated softly, tilting his head. "And how exactly do you determine who's qualified?" He adjusted his red hat slightly, watching as the manager's eyes followed the movement with barely concealed disgust. The manager shifted her weight, her confidence wavering for a moment. "Sir, these vehicles represent significant investments. Our typical clients usually—" She glanced at his casual clothes and old wallet sticking out of his back pocket, "present themselves differently." The young salesperson looked mortified. He took another step back, nearly bumping into a display stand holding car brochures. The shuffling sound echoed through the quiet showroom, drawing even more attention to the scene. "I see." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "And how exactly should I present myself?" His voice remained calm, but there was a hint of something in it that made the manager blink rapidly. "Should I wear a different hat, perhaps?" The manager's face flushed red. "Sir, this is a high-end dealership. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who we feel isn't serious about making a purchase." Her voice had risen slightly, carrying across the showroom floor. Other staff members had stopped pretending to work. They stood frozen, watching the confrontation like audience members at a theater performance. The receptionist had even stopped answering phones, her hand hovering over a ringing line. "And you've decided I'm not serious because—" Robert left the question hanging in the air. The silence that followed was deafening. The manager's face grew even redder as she realized the corner she'd backed herself into. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," she finally said, her voice shaking slightly with barely contained anger. "We can recommend several other dealerships that might be more suitable for your needs." The young salesperson looked like he might faint. He'd backed up so far he was now practically hiding behind a potted plant. Other customers were whispering among themselves, some shaking their heads, others recording discreetly with their phones. Robert reached into his back pocket, watching as the manager tensed up. "Before I leave," he said calmly, "I think there's something you should see." His fingers closed around the folded papers he'd been carrying. The manager's expression changed from anger to uncertainty. The showroom had grown so quiet you could hear the gentle hum of the air conditioning. Every person in the building seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. "I don't need to see anything," the manager said quickly, raising her hand to stop him. "I need you to exit the premises immediately, or I'll be forced to call security." Robert smiled, slowly pulling out the papers from his pocket. "Oh, I think you'll want to see these," he said softly. "They're quite important." The creased papers in his hand held the truth that would change everything in the next few moments. Time seemed to stand still in the showroom as Robert unfolded the papers. The crisp sound of paper being smoothed out echoed through the silent space. Sunlight streaming through the windows caught the official gold seal at the bottom of the document, making it gleam. "What exactly do you think you're showing me?" the manager asked, her voice wavering slightly. Her arms were crossed tightly across her chest, but her eyes kept darting to the papers in Robert's hands. The young salesperson had abandoned his hiding spot behind the plant and was now inching forward, curiosity winning over fear. Other employees had started moving closer too, like moths drawn to a flame, trying to catch a glimpse of what Robert was holding. These, Robert said calmly, are the ownership transfer documents for Premium Motors. He held them out, watching as the manager's face transformed from confusion to disbelief. As of yesterday afternoon, I own this dealership. The silence that followed was absolute. Someone dropped a pen, and the sound of it hitting the floor was like a thunderclap. The manager's face drained of all color, her clipboard slipping from her grasp and clattering to the ground. That's impossible," she stammered, her eyes scanning the documents frantically. The owner never said anything about. Her voice trailed off as she recognized the signatures and legal seals on the papers. The young salesperson's mouth hung open in shock. Around the showroom, other employees froze in place, some mid-conversation with customers, others halfway through paperwork. The wealthy couple who had been ignored earlier were now smiling, clearly enjoying the unexpected turn of events. I'd wanted to experience the dealership as a regular customer before announcing the change in ownership, Robert explained, his voice gentle but firm. I believe it's important to know how all customers are treated, not just the ones who look like they can afford our most expensive cars. The manager swayed slightly, and another employee quickly brought her a chair. She sank into it, still staring at the ownership papers as if they might disappear if she looked away. Her perfectly maintained professional demeanor had completely crumbled. I don't know what to say," she whispered, looking up at Robert with wide eyes. The reality of how she just treated her new boss was clearly sinking in. Her hands trembled as she tried to straighten her suit jacket. Robert took off his red hat and ran a hand through his hair. "You don't need to say anything right now," he said. "But I think we should continue this conversation in private." He gestured toward the manager's office, or rather, what would now be his office. The other customers in the showroom had begun whispering among themselves, some hiding smiles behind their hands. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything were nodding approvingly at Robert, the gentleman giving him a subtle thumbs up. The young salesperson, still processing what had happened, suddenly straightened his tie and stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, sir," he began, his voice shaky, "I want to apologize for." Robert raised his hand gently, stopping him mid-sentence. "We'll have time to talk later," he said kindly. "Right now, I believe you have customers waiting." He nodded toward the wealthy couple who had been standing unattended all this time. As the young salesperson hurried off to help the waiting customers, Robert turned back to the manager, who was still sitting in her chair, looking shell-shocked. "Shall we?" he asked, gesturing again toward the office. The manager stood up slowly, her legs unsteady. The clicking of her heels was now less confident as she walked toward the office, the ownership papers clutched in her trembling hands. The rest of the staff quickly dispersed, suddenly finding urgent work to do at their desks. Robert followed her, pausing briefly to place his red hat on a nearby counter. The morning sun caught the dealership's logo on the wall, and he made a mental note to make some changes, not just to the signage, but to the entire culture of the business. This moment would mark the beginning of a significant transformation at Premium Motors. Inside the glass office, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The manager sat rigidly in her chair, her eyes fixed on the desk where the ownership papers now lay. Robert settled into the chair across from her, his relaxed posture a stark contrast to her stiffness. "I imagine you're expecting me to fire you," Robert began softly, watching as she flinched at the word fire. That would be the predictable ending to this story, wouldn't it? He leaned back, studying the certificates hanging on the wall behind her desk. The manager's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. Through the glass walls, they could see the showroom slowly returning to normal, though many employees kept stealing glances at the office. "I've been manager here for 8 years, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've hit every sales target, won regional awards." Her voice trailed off as she realized these achievements might mean nothing now. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Your sales records are impressive, he agreed. But I'm more interested in something else right now. He paused, letting the words sink in. I want to understand why you treated me, or rather, someone you thought was just a regular customer, that way. Outside, the young salesperson was enthusiastically showing cars to the wealthy couple who had waited so patiently. His transformation from nervous wreck to confident professional was remarkable. The elderly couple who had witnessed everything were signing papers at another desk, occasionally glancing toward the office. The manager shifted uncomfortably in her chair. I made assumptions, she admitted, her voice growing stronger as she forced herself to face the truth. I saw the hat, the casual clothes, and She stopped, realizing how it sounded. And you decided I couldn't possibly be a serious buyer, Robert finished for her. He pulled out his old wallet, the one that had partly prompted her judgment. This wallet, he said, holding it up, was a gift from my father when I got my first job. It's not expensive, but it reminds me of where I came from. A tear slipped down the manager's cheek, which she quickly wiped away. The morning sun streaming through the windows cast patterns on the desk between them, creating an almost artistic scene of light and shadow. 20 years ago, Robert continued, I walked into a bank wearing clothes much like these. I needed a loan to start my first business. He smiled at the memory. The bank manager wouldn't even look at my business plan, said I didn't fit their client profile. The manager's head snapped up, recognition flickering in her eyes. She saw herself in that long-ago bank manager, making the same judgments, the same mistakes. I didn't come here today to fire you, Robert said, leaning forward. I came to understand this business from every angle. And now that I have, I want to make it better. He gestured toward the showroom. Every person who walks through those doors deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing or what they believe. The tension in the manager's shoulders began to ease slightly. Outside, a customer in work clothes entered the dealership. They watched as several salespeople immediately moved to help him. A small but noticeable change already taking place. I'd like to keep you on as manager, Robert said, causing her eyes to widen in surprise. But things need to change. And I think you're the perfect person to help make those changes happen. He smiled warmly. After all, who better to teach others about avoiding prejudice than someone who's learned this lesson firsthand? Relief flooded the manager's face, followed quickly by determination. She sat up straighter, her professional demeanor returning, but this time without the coldness. Thank you, she said quietly. I won't let you down. Robert stood up, straightening his casual sweater. I know you won't, he replied. Now, shall we go meet the rest of the staff? I think it's time for some proper introductions. He picked up his red hat from the desk, a reminder of the morning's events that would soon become a symbol of transformation at Premium Motors. The manager stood too, smoothing her suit with steady hands now. Together, they turned toward the door, ready to face the showroom and begin the process of genuine change. The morning's drama was ending, but the real story was just beginning. The next few weeks at Premium Motors brought changes that nobody had expected. Robert set up his office in a corner of the showroom floor rather than using the upstairs executive suite. He wanted to be where the action was, where he could see and hear everything happening in his dealership. The manager took her learning moment seriously. One morning, she gathered the entire staff before opening hours. The showroom was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the shuffle of feet as everyone gathered around. I've been doing this job for 8 years, she began, her voice strong but humble. And for all that time, I thought I knew exactly what a serious buyer looked like. She glanced at Robert, who stood quietly at the back of the group. I was wrong. The young salesperson who had first helped Robert raised his hand hesitantly. I've been wondering, he said, how many sales we've lost because we judge people too quickly. His question hung in the air, making several staff members shift uncomfortably. Robert stepped forward, carrying a stack of folders. "I did some research," he said, opening the top folder. In the past year, this dealership lost approximately 30% of potential buyers before they even got to discuss financing. The numbers painted a clear picture of opportunities missed due to prejudice. The staff training sessions that followed weren't the usual boring presentations about sales targets and closing techniques. Instead, Robert brought in people from all walks of life to share their car buying experiences. A construction worker talked about being ignored while shopping for his dream car. A successful business owner described being dismissed because she wore gym clothes. One particularly memorable morning, Robert's father visited the dealership. The old mechanic, dressed in his work clothes and covered in engine grease, shared stories from his years of fixing luxury cars. "Every car tells a story," he said, "and so does every customer, if you take the time to listen." The manager took these lessons to heart. She started a new practice. Every morning, she would randomly select a different hat from a box by her desk and wear it all day. Some days, it was a baseball cap, others a beanie, or even the occasional cowboy hat. It reminded everyone that appearances shouldn't dictate service. The young salesperson who had first helped Robert blossomed under the new approach. His nervous stutter disappeared as he learned to focus on really listening to customers instead of judging them. He became known for giving every visitor the same enthusiastic welcome, whether they arrived in a luxury car or on foot. Customer feedback began to change. The comment cards, which used to focus mainly on car features and prices, now often mentioned how welcome people felt. For the first time, one card read, "I didn't feel like I had to dress up just to look at cars." Robert introduced a unique training exercise. Each staff member had to try buying a car at other dealerships while dressed differently than usual. The experiences they brought back were eye-opening. The maintenance supervisor, who usually wore crisp uniforms, was ignored when he wore his weekend clothes. The finance manager, known for her designer suits, was treated dismissively in jeans and a t-shirt. The showroom itself transformed too. Robert replaced the intimidating security desk near the entrance with a comfortable welcome area. Fresh coffee and snacks were available to everyone, not just serious buyers. The strict dress code for staff was relaxed, helping customers feel more at ease. One day, the manager found the red hat that had started it all sitting on her desk. Robert had left it there with a note. A reminder that our biggest lessons often come from unexpected places. She smiled and added it to the hat box, where it became part of the daily rotation. The changes weren't just about attitude. Sales numbers began climbing steadily. Word spread about the dealership where everyone was treated with respect. People started driving from other cities just to experience the difference. But the most significant change was in the staff themselves. The artificial smiles and rehearsed sales pitches were replaced by genuine conversations. They learned that every person who walked through their doors had a story, a dream, and deserved the chance to make it come true. As Robert watched his dealership transform, he remembered his father's words from long ago. "Son, in business and in life, treat everyone like they matter, because they do." Premium Motors was becoming living proof of that simple but powerful truth. 6 months after the Red Hat incident, Premium Motors had become a very different place. The morning sun streamed through the showroom windows, highlighting a wall that now displayed hundreds of photographs. Customers standing proudly next to their new cars, each picture telling its own unique story. The manager stood in front of this wall, adjusting a newly added photo. It showed a young teacher in casual clothes beside a modest but reliable car. "She came in yesterday," the manager explained to a group of new employees during their orientation. 3 other dealerships had turned her away. Today, she's driving her first new car. Robert watched from his showroom office, smiling as he remembered his own first car purchase. The dealership had exceeded even his highest expectations. Sales were up 40%, but more importantly, the culture had transformed completely. The young salesperson who had first helped Robert that fateful day was now the top performer, not because he pushed for sales, but because he genuinely connected with every customer. He kept a small notebook where he wrote down their stories: the carpenter saving for his daughter's college fund, the nurse working double shifts to afford her dream car. The most significant change was visible in the parking lot. Unlike other luxury dealerships with their rows of high-end vehicles, Premium Motors' lot had become delightfully diverse. A construction worker's truck might be parked next to a doctor's luxury sedan, a teacher's compact car beside a business owner's sports car. One morning, Robert called an all-staff meeting. The showroom filled with employees, all wearing name tags that now included not just their names, but also their dreams. It was another change the manager had implemented, a reminder that everyone, customers and staff alike, was working towards something. 6 months ago, Robert began, standing next to his old Honda Civic, which he'd permanently parked in the showroom as a reminder. This dealership taught me an important lesson about judgment. Today you've taught me an even more valuable one about change. He walked over to the wall of photos, touching one that showed an elderly couple with their new car. These aren't just pictures of sales, he said. They're stories of trust, of respect, of dreams coming true. Each one represents a moment when someone walked in here and found more than just a car. They found people who believed in them. The manager stepped forward, wearing the red hat that had started it all. It had become a tradition for staff members to wear it on their work anniversaries, a symbol of how far they'd come. Our success isn't about the cars we sell, she added. It's about the people we serve. Robert unveiled a new sign that would hang above the entrance. In elegant letters, it read, "Everyone's dream has a home here." The staff applauded, many wiping away tears. They understood that these weren't just words. They were a promise they lived by every day. The final transformation came in an unexpected way. Other dealerships in the area had started sending their employees to Premium Motors for training. The manager, once known for her harsh judgments, now taught workshops about inclusive customer service and the importance of looking beyond appearances. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Robert sat in his old Honda Civic, parked prominently in the showroom. He watched as a young man in work boots walked in, clearly nervous about being in a luxury car dealership. 3 salespeople immediately moved to welcome him, genuine smiles on their faces. The manager approached Robert's car and leaned against it, both of them watching the scene unfold. "You know," she said, "I keep expecting to wake up one day and find this was all a dream. That I'm back to being that person who judged everyone by their cover." Robert smiled, remembering the confrontation that had started this journey. "Sometimes," he replied, "the best dreams are the ones we live every day." He pointed to the wall of photos, now reaching nearly to the ceiling. Each of these represents a moment when someone was treated with dignity, respect, and kindness. That's not a dream. That's who we are now. As they watched the young man in work boots break into a huge smile, clearly feeling welcomed and respected, both Robert and the manager knew that Premium Motors had become more than just a car dealership. It had become a place where prejudices were left at the door, where every dream was valid, and where a simple red hat had sparked a revolution of kindness.